Shalom, shalom, mishpocha. Welcome back to the third installment of Torah Tidbits, Shavuot. I want to go into the book of Ruth and why Ruth has been chosen for the book to be read during Shavuot. Let me read a quote from you, a quote to you from Chabad.org regarding Ruth and Shavuot. It says, "Our sages note several interesting connections between the biblical book of Ruth and the festival of Shavuot. A. Shavuot falls in the harvest season and is defined by Torah as the culmination of 7-week count, beginning with the first barley harvest. The story of Ruth unfolds against the background of the barley harvest in ancient Judea, with the mitzvah of lechet, allowing the poor to glean the stalks that fall to the ground during the harvest, playing a pivotal role in the narrative. B. Ruth is the ancestress of King David, who in turn is the ancestress of Mashiach Yeshua. David was born on the festival of Shavuot in the year 2854 from creation, or 907 before the Common Era, and passed away on the same date 70 years later. Ruth is the paradigm of the Ger Tzedek, or the righteous convert, who with great sacrifice forsakes her former life and identity and is born anew as a Jew. In essence, however, we are all Gerai Tzedek, having undergone that very process ourselves on the first Shavuot of history, when we assembled at the foot of Mount Sinai to be born anew as God's people. The entire book of Ruth is included in the Tikkun Le'ev Shavuot, the Torah Digest studies on the night of the festival. In many communities, it is publicly read in the course of the morning service on Shavuot day." Now, this is from Chabad.org. I kind of added some things, as you probably noticed. I said Yeshua, which you won't find that at Chabad.org. So I kind of added my own stuff into that quote. But when I read it, I can't show you parentheses. So here's another quote from Chabad.org. "On the 6th of Sivan, in the year 2448 from creation, or 1313 before the Common Era, 7 weeks after the Exodus, God revealed himself at Mount Sinai. The entire people of Israel, 600,000 heads of household and their families, as well as the souls of all future generations of Jews, heard God declare the first two of the commandments and witnessed God's communication of the other 8 through Moshe, following the revelation of Moses ascending the mountain for 40 days. To receive the remainder of the Torah from God. At Sinai, God rescinded the decree and divided that had been in force since the second day of creation, separating the spiritual and the physical into 2 hermeneutic worlds. From this point on, the higher realms could descend into the lower realms, and the lower could ascend to higher. Thus was born the mitzvah, a physical deed that, by virtue of the fact that it is commanded by God, brings godliness into the physical world. It's a little bit of Kabbalic or Kabbalistic mysticism there, kind of thrown in there. But Ruth was a pagan. She was a Moabitess. She was actually an enemy of Israel, a pagan before she converted to Judaism. So when did she convert? When she married one of the sons of Naomi. In marrying her son, she also went through the conversion process to become a Jew, to become a Hebrew. So we know by the story of Ruth that Ruth's husband dies, which she is no longer obligated to follow Judaism, or no longer obligated in any way, shape, or form to that family. She could have went back to her own people. Now, her sister-in-law, which was a pagan as well, Orpah, she left Naomi, and after her husband died, she went back to her own people. And Naomi said, "Ruth, why don't you do the same? Go ahead, you're under no obligation." She says, "No, I'm going to stick with you. I'm going to be with you." And born out of this is the famous verse where Ruth 1:16, it says, "And Ruth said, Entreat me not to leave thee, or to return from following after thee. For whither thou goest, I will go, and whither thou lodgest, I will lodge. Thy people shall be my people, and thy God my God." And we hear this quoted a lot at weddings, Christian and Jewish. And it's interesting that the quote is actually, in context of the story, was between Naomi and Ruth, not between a husband or a wife, but because of, joining yourself to a person has very wedding type connotations. It's used at weddings. And there's a wedding that takes place in the book of Ruth. Eventually we see that Ruth marries Boaz. And Boaz is a distant relative of Naomi, and also in the lineage and line of Messiah Yeshua. And of course, Ruth, being a Gentile, a Moabitess, joins to Boaz, marries him, and becomes a Jew. Well, she already was, considering she had married Naomi's son, but you kind of get the impression that she didn't have to be a Jew after her husband died, per se, but she still kept with this. So there's a wedding between Boaz and Ruth. Not only that, but during Shavuot, there's a marriage, an anniversary of sorts between the people of Israel and God, because God gave the Torah, the wedding vows at Mount Sinai, saying, will you follow this Torah? Will you become a part of me? Will you join yourself unto me through this Torah? And before Israel even heard all the commandments, they said, yes, we will. I do. So they became the bride of Hashem. And so, there's the wedding theme in the book of Ruth, therefore the wedding theme in Shavuot. And these are a lot of the reasons why Ruth is read during Shavuot. And it's also a beautiful book and a beautiful meaning because, as I mentioned in the last video, that the Gentiles, being the mixed multitude who were present at Sinai during the giving of the Torah, also said we will and joined themselves to the commandments of Yahweh and to Yahweh himself and to the people of Israel. So this shows that Gentiles can be brought into the Torah as well. And the book of Ruth is all about a Gentile being brought to Torah, being brought into the family of Israel. And Acts chapter 2 in the Brit Kadesha, that's what it's all about as well. Because when the Ruach HaKodesh came and made it so that everybody was able to hear the Torah in their own language and in their own tongue, more Gentiles came to the Torah during Pentecost, during Acts chapter 2, during Shavuot of that time period. So it's just a beautiful thing, and it shows you that there's one law for Jew and Gentiles, that it's not the Noahide laws for the Gentiles and all 613 commandments for the Jews. No, it's not an exclusive club, even though the rabbis desire it to be and try to make it so to be that way, but it's not that way at all. The Gentiles who accept Yeshua, Messiah, and join themselves to the God of Israel are just as obligated to keep the Torah as somebody who was born flesh and blood from the lineage of Avraham. So hopefully you enjoyed this third installment of Torah Tidbits, Shavuot, focusing on the book of Ruth. I pray that you read. I haven't quoted a lot of these passages because I want you to read these passages for yourself and ask God to open up your heart and mind to receive all that He would have you to understand regarding the traditional readings of Shavuot, from that which is in the Tanakh, the Torah, to that which is in the book of Ruth, to that which is in the Brit Chadasha in Acts chapter 2. So Shalom and Shavuot Tov and Chag Sameach Shavuot Mishpocha. Happy Shavuot. Shalom.